part 3 of my Game Master series. We're looking at steps. We're looking at building blocks to help you, as a role player, as a game master, as a world builder, as the engine of the gods, to free up your creativity, to bring that enthusiasm onto the table. And through these podcasts, through these vlogs, we're looking at a couple of points here and there, that friction points, places that might cause a challenge or might have a little bit of anxiety, and free that up. Pull that away. So this way you can enjoy the adventure. Because ultimately, like we touched in part 1 of this podcast, you're a player too. You're there to watch the story unfold. You are there to see how things work out. Yes, absolutely, your role is a little bit more complex, but just as you want to make sure your players have a good time, you need to make sure you have a good time also. So let's talk about Adventure 1. That first adventure, that first narrative that you're going to run. A couple of steps to keep in mind to help create that flow, to help capture that flow. I don't want to use the words to help keep you out of trouble, but it does take some courage for the first time to step up as a game master and run an adventure. It does on there, especially if you've got 4 or 5 players and there's expectations. Just a real example here for myself. I have been playing D&D for a long, long time. I am extremely confident at running an adventure at a moment's notice. I am extremely confident being a player. I feel that there is nothing that an adventure can throw at me as a game master, as a dungeon master, that I would not be able to handle. Whether that's true or not, I mean, I've had good adventures or bad adventures, really doesn't matter. I'm not saying that from the perspective of bragging. I'm saying that from the perspective of someone that has found their vision and voice and feels comfortable with D&D. I feel comfortable with Rollmaster. I feel comfortable with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I feel comfortable with Paranoia. All gaming systems that I really, really enjoy. But now I picked up a new system, Invisible Sun. Extremely intriguing. I am beyond excited to run my first game. I've been creating, I won't say a campaign, because there's a lot of interesting ideas. I mean, this is a completely new role-playing system for me. So not only am I learning the rules, I'm trying to figure out, well, we're going to recruit for players soon. On top of that, I'm exploring what kind of world building do I want to do? What type of adventures do I want to run? I'm supposed to be here helping you with this podcast. I am a little bit intimidated. I am looking and saying that first adventure, I'm going in literally adventure 0. New system, new players, new world, new way of thinking. It's exciting but terrifying at the same time. I tell you that because it is a challenge for that very, very first time on there. So these are the steps that I'm going to utilize, having tremendous role-playing experience that's been rebooted back to Adventure 0 going in. The first piece is whether the adventure is something that you've purchased, it's been written, it's ready to go, it's got narrative, it's got maps, it's got text box to read. It could be something that you've created yourself. It could be a world, an encounter, an adventure that you've created yourself. Regardless, the important thing is to sit down a few times casually. It's got to be fun. It's not school. It's not study. Sit down and read through the adventure. See the flow points. Kind of get an idea of the different places the party, the group can go, maybe what they can do, understand maybe some of the encounters they might face. Read it through 3 or 4 or 5 times very, very casually. Then kind of make a note, and this is something that could happen, an hour before the adventure begins. This is something that could happen a few days before, usually about a week before I run something, a couple of times during the week where I have a little bit of time. I'll leave my notes out, I'll leave the adventure out. I'll just kind of look through it. We're just looking to get an idea of the narrative, not memorize anything or railroad anything. Then I look at some of the encounters that the party's going to face. Do they have special rules? Do they have some challenge points that are going to facilitate something that I have to possibly look up or figure out. If that's the case, I'll make a note of it where those rules are. So an example would be like Dungeons and Dragons. If they're fighting a beholder, which has a variety of magical attacks and magical abilities, that could get very, very interesting. I will make a note of the pages in the monster manual and the player's handbook of the spells that the beholder can use if I have to look up those rules, just so if there's a question or something comes up, I don't have to worry about where to go. I don't have to memorize it. I don't have to worry about where to go. I can just simply go and look up that page and resolve it. We're not going to earmark everything, just the stuff that might be a little bit of a challenge. So now we're ready to run the adventure. We're like 10 minutes out, 15 minutes out. If it's possible, and a lot depends on where you physically play. Are you playing in a private setting? Are you playing in a public setting? Are you playing in a massive group setting? Do you have access to the gaming area a little bit before? If it's possible to set up before your players arrive, and it doesn't have to be 30 minutes before, it might be at the gaming shop. If you start at 7, you get there 6:30 or 6:45 if possible. Can you set up your notes? Can you set up your game screen? Can you set up any handouts? Get everything ready. So this way, not to make it all corporate, you're ready to roll on there. You've got everything set. When your players sit down, you can talk to them, you can engage them. As soon as everyone arrives and there's that silence at the table, your players arrive, your 4, 5, 6 players, they sit down, they get their sheets out, they get the dice out, they've got their tablets up and running, and then it always happens like all at the same time, they just grow silent and they turn to face you. And now they're looking at you and they're like, okay, Fritz, we're ready to go. Like, let's roll this. Let's do this on here. And at that moment, if you're set up, if you understand kind of the flow and narrative of the adventure, if you have those potential, you're not going to be able to earmark them all, but those potential challenge points out, you're ready to jump in to 0. On a side note, to finish us out, because I've been asked this before, and this is a good place to stack it on there. Fritz, what type of adventure should I run for my first adventure on there? Your first adventure should be, every adventure should be, what's your passion point? What do you want to run as the game master? What do you want to bring to the table? Because that's going to free up your enthusiasm. That's going to create synergy on there. So what do you want to run? Combat heavy hack and slash? Do you want to run a dungeon crawl? Do you want to run political intrigue? Do you want to do a little bit of role play, ROLL versus ROLE, a little bit of both on there? Find out what you want to run, fall in love with it, and just go for it. Just do it on there. Over time, with your gaming group, you'll develop a synergy. You'll meet in the middle. You'll find this blend of their personalities, the type of adventures they like to run, the type of adventures that you like to run on there. But ultimately, so you can put forth the best narrative, you have to be passionate about the type of game that you want to run on there. Focus on that and pick your adventure from that perspective.